Okay, I'm very excited to have Dr. Jasmine Nicole Cobb with me today. So I'm doing a series. You may have seen a previous video where I'm doing a series with Black women philosophers, but I'm also doing a separate series on the magic of Belle Vie Writers and Black women writers. And so I'm featuring fabulous members of Belle Vie Writers like Dr. Jasmine Nicole Cobb. And we're really just going to get into writing as a centering, liberating, and empowering practice, like the magic of Black women writers and what we do and how we do it, what we do. And writing multiple books because we have written multiple books and we are still writing books and other things. So we're going to get into all of those things and I'm very excited about it. So
Mhm.
I am Dr. Catherine Sophia Bell. I'm a Black woman who did all the things that Black women are told we're supposed to do, all the degrees, the job, the kids, the husband. I had it all and I felt trapped by all of it. So I liberated myself. I quit a 20-year successful academic career with tenure. I got happily unmarried and delightfully divorced. I'm on this fabulous erotic empowerment journey. And part of what's been magical and powerful about all of that for me has been being able to take the things that I didn't like doing and put them to the side and take all the things that I really love doing and doing them in a different, more empowered way. So I took all the things that I loved about academia and recreated that aspect of it in Belle Vie Academy and through Belle Vie Writers. And part of the benefit of that is being in conversation with fabulous people like Dr. Jasmine Nicole Cobb. So let me do a formal introduction before we get into the shenanigans
Sounds good.
and the brilliance and insight and all of that as well.
And
Um,
shenanigans.
and the shenanigans, both in. So Dr. Jasmine Nicole Cobb is a visual and cultural historian. She earned her PhD at the University of Pennsylvania, and she is now the Earl D. McLean Jr. Professor of African American Studies and Art History, and Visual Studies at Duke University. She is also a fellow at the National Humanities Center, so we are excited about that. Her books explore women in popular culture through still and moving images. Her first book is Picturing Freedom, Remaking Black Visuality in the Early 19th Century. And that book looks to images to investigate early ideas about emancipation and African American citizenship before the 13th Amendment. Her most recent book is New Growth, The Art and Texture of Black Hair, which we have right here and is also behind her on the bookshelf. And that book considers the concept and portrayal of quote unquote natural hair through an exploration of hair, clippings, slave narratives, scrapbooks, travel illustrations, documentary films, photography, and fine art. She offers a long view of the cultural and textural significance of Black hair. And I also have to give this, I tabbed the shout out to, this was when we weren't sure if we were going to go public about the name of the group.
Yes.
So there's a shout out in here where she says, through the pandemic, however, I found a crew and a reinvigorated friendship with Catherine Sophia Bell, also from different phases and places in life. Our group in italics
Yes.
has deepened my commitment to my work and helped me embrace the fullness of life that happens around it. Together, we wept about the murder of George Floyd while urging one another toward deeper self love and self care. For you all, I am eternally grateful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And we are grateful for you as well, obviously.
Thank you.
And currently, she's working on a book that explores the visual history of abolitionist Harriet Tubman, as well as a creative nonfiction work on travel. We will get more into the book projects after this. In addition to books, Dr. Cobb writes op-eds and commissions. She also consults on exhibitions, curates public programs, and offers workshops that explore art, cultural identities, and archival collections. And she also offers a self-paced book proposal workshop that I will link to in the description once this video is posted. So welcome. Happy to have you
Thank
here.
you. Thank you. Thank
And
you.
excited to get into it. So let's just start with our baseline of like how we met, how we connected. What are your memories of that?
Yeah, so I mean, the intros kind of give me like a long view of all of this because it includes the writing of that book. So we first met at Penn State
Yes.
Africana Research Center. You were already faculty there. I
Mhm.
came to town for an interview. I was giving a talk at the time on what would be picture freedom,
Yes.
which was fun in the craziest sense. Picture freedom and the material in there disturbed some people. and they want to express that in my talks. And I vividly remember you saying that you and others were there to pounce on whomever might have wanted
Yeah,
to
if anybody
engage
gets out of pocket, we
incorrectly. Yes. So that was my introduction to you. And then we gathered occasionally at someone's house, not so much for writing, but more so just community,
yeah.
women of color at Penn State trying to get through. So that interview was a success, but I did not elect to stay at Penn State. I moved on to Northwestern, and I worked there for a few years. And I think somewhere in this, social media became more of a thing, and so
Mm-hmm.
we loosely stayed in contact.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came to Duke from Northwestern, and we were loosely in contact, and you were posting about all the
All the
transitions,
things.
all the things. A sort of pin in my visual brain from that time was you posting a jet cover.
Oh, yes, of my maternal
Yeah,
grandmother.
yeah. And that was so beautifully wrapped up in your becoming story at the moment. And then you posted, I need to write. And whoever want to write with me, here's the link. And so I
Yes,
got on and I was in a different writing group, which is shaded a little bit in that
and the acknowledgement.
what you in the acknowledgments. They were lovely and certainly helped with my journey, but the George Floyd moment of 2020 in the beginning of the pandemic was a clearing, as I
Yeah.
perceive it. It cleared out lots of stuff, lots of people,
Hmm.
ignited a lot of transitions. And so from then we started basically seeing each other every day because
Every
we were
day. It was
writing.
such a beautiful anchor for me. And
Mhm.
I often say, like, I create the things that I need in the
Mhm.
world, knowing that if I need it, there are other Black women and women of color who also
Mhm.
need that space. And so I knew I needed an anchor to focus and to be in community and to be able to not have to shut off that part of myself that was grieving all the things
Yes.
that were going on. And so it was beautiful to be able to like create and cultivate that space and people show up and really understand the assignment in the space
Yes.
and just be present together so that we could continue to advance our writing because our writing was still important to us. It is its
Yeah,
own liberatory practice and
for
censoring
sure.
practice, but also holds space for other things that were happening in our lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the beginning of a beautiful thing. And 5 years later,
Was
we're
still
still doing it
writing.
and stuff is still
Yeah.
popping off, and so we still
Hmm.
have a space to come together and talk about that. I know
Yeah.
for me, I always remember when you gave your talk and there was like the dialect that's included in some of your slides and
Hmm.
your refusal to perform the kind of
Yeah.
oral presentation of that dialect. Like you could
Hmm.
read it for yourself, but what I'm not going to do is like
Yes.
reenact that for you. And that always to me was such a powerful like simple but powerful moment of like, this is how I'm taking control of this space and how I'm presenting, my scholarship and my research. Something else in there that I want to tap into a little bit, even though we're focusing on the writing thing, but of course we're always here to help all the people who are
Hmm.
doing the academic things, is I do remember they tried to offer you something kind of early in the process of your postdoc. And for people who are in this place of, negotiating and thinking about your options, it's often better to have multiple offers so that you can kind of negotiate based on the different offers that you have. And I appreciate your refusal also to accept this very early offer before you really have an opportunity to go on the market and see what your other options are. And so some people would be like, well, it's the bird in the hand. What if nobody else offers me anything? But you seem to have just a strong faith in yourself and your value and what you could bring to the table and what people would offer you that you did not feel obligated to accept this early offer at Penn
Yeah.
State.
I forgot all about that, but you're right. There was like this kind of a preempt. That wasn't the language they used, but it was like a get in early, which is always an interesting thing because when places do this for Black women, I find they won't say you're great, you're fabulous. We hope you'll stay. We'll
Hmm.
just, give you this thing and hope you'll be afraid not to take it.
Hmm.
My consciousness around negotiating is highly informed by spades playing. And so I
Mm.
just I just refuse to give into fear, even if I don't actually have a good thing known to me.
Yeah.
I just don't believe that being scared really works well
Hmm.
for people. And so I didn't know at the time what was coming.
Hmm.
I don't think Northwestern had even posted that job yet. But I knew that that wasn't going to work for me. I think at the time it was also the case I had already had like one or two driving while black situations happen to me.
In
So it
Central
was like,
Pennsylvania.
come on, like really, And so it
Hmm.
wasn't a definite no
Hmm.
um to Penn State at the time, but I just didn't feel compelled to rush.
Yeah.
I hear that's another thing I hear people say a lot. Successful people refuse to be rushed,
Yeah.
sped up in your process. And so yeah, I just kind of leaned into that it wasn't a no, but there was no reason for me to just not let the process play out and
Yeah.
see what happened.
I love this. I love that your starting point is like hashtag for the culture spades. Like I'm
Yep, Spades
Jersey.
will
We're
get you
both from
together.
Jersey. So I love that spades is informing this decision making, but also it's a mindset of abundance of like, what is meant for me will be there, and I don't have to be
Mhm.
rushed by this institution, but also I don't have to be scared that there's nothing else available to me. And we talk about this a lot actually in the writing group of like the kind of scarcity mentality that is really ingrained into high achievers
Yes.
around like, okay, only so many people are going to go to college, only so many people can get
Mhm.
their PhD. Once you get your PhD, only so many people are going to be able to get a tenure track
Yes.
job, and then only so many people can get tenure, and then only so many people can get full. And so it's like you're constantly kind of applying for or rehearse, or you're constantly feeling like there's only so many spots and you have to do whatever to get those spots, and you should cling to them whenever they're available. But our lived experience shows us that there really is, even amongst the conversation of scarcity, there is still abundance there and options and opportunities that are available. And I've seen you really like step into that in a really powerful way consistently over the years.
Thank you. Thank you. It's I definitely internally will have the churning, but when the rubber hits the road, I tend not to fold. And I think it's higher ed does this number on us, this kind of you're so special, you become inadequate somehow,
Hmm.
you're lucky to get to college. You're lucky to get out of college. Like you said, you're lucky to get a tenure track job.
Hmm.
And before you know it, all that luck means like you're ill-equipped to do or be anything else in life but
Hmm.
this. And so I think when I hear, people saying they're starting this journey or, on social media, on threads in particular, I see a lot of people saying they're starting grad school. I tell them, hold on to yourself because there's always an opportunity to lose yourself, to throw yourself away, to just
Hmm.
lose touch. And if you're with it, it's going down. And so I
Yes.
try to refuse that as much as possible.
Yes to refusal. I think about like
You
Hortense Spillers
go.
talking about how institutions oftentimes are about forgetting, and we have to constantly like remember and remind ourselves of like who we
Mhm.
are and what we've built, and not let that just get swept up in the
For sure.
institutional structures. And then also remember again that the skill set that you have is very valuable and transferable. So again, that scarcity mindset is both that there are only so many positions and you're lucky to have one, but also like you said that you can only do this in this box, and you can't take that, you can't translate this skill set outside of the box. And it's like actually it's very transferable outside of the
It
box.
is. It's very transferable. I think another way I managed to kind of not buy in is to refuse a disciplinary identity that
Hmm.
I've always been able to work across disciplines. And even in the face of people saying, oh, you can't do that and be careful and, just not accepting that. Like, even in undergrad, I had a major and probably three minors, and every
Hmm.
minor could have been a major if I had more time, So I think
Hmm.
just finding ways of just refusing, how
Yes.
by any means.
By any and all means necessary,
All means,
refusing
yeah.
their agenda and their narrative that they're constantly
Hmm.
trying to like impose onto
Hmm.
us. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's very important.
yeah.
I mean, we got into this a little bit, but do you want to say any more about just what your experience has been like with La Belle Vie Writers, and maybe how that shifted over the 5 years, because a lot has changed in the
Oh,
world,
that
but
has
also with book
changed.
projects and things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's see. When we started La Belle Vie, um, I was writing New Growth.
Hmm.
I don't know where in that process, because we talk about book writing usually only thinking about like the last 2 years of
Yeah,
writing, when it's usually like a 8 to 10 year kind
absolutely.
of thing, you know. Um, by that point, I think I already knew I was going with Duke Press. I probably had a few chapters. In my life, I was pregnant with my last child.
Yes.
So that, marks time for me. And so I was showing up every day. And I remember, it was a group of us, but you and I were writing at the same time. You were finishing Boudoir.
Yes.
And so the closer it got to the end, we were like joining on the weekend, or like
Yes.
text me like I'm about to get on. And I'm like, great, I'm gonna do it. And that really worked for me, because from being pregnant to then having an infant and writing
Yes.
with an infant in my lap, um, it was really good for me to just have like someone say, "You got 30 minutes to write." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm with it. 30
Yes.
minutes, let's see what we can do." And so that's how, the process evolved. And then the books came out. I see
Yes.
Bouvoir and Belle behind me.
Yes.
Um, and I think as we kept going, we kind of have flowed together and having breaks of like Friday off, or,
Yes.
a little less writing in the summer, or writing other things. And so now I'm still in La Belle Vie, and now starting this process again with new books. And
Yes.
that's a very rewarding experience, I would
Hmm.
say, to have the group, the community around it,
Hmm.
for a few reasons. I mean, where I am in my life and career, to have writing community not tethered to an institution is really
Yes.
important. And if
Yes.
I could auntie for a minute, I would suggest even junior profs like seek that out, so that
Yes.
your writing, you can find a way for your writing to be your own and not
Hmm.
the institutions. And so I think La Belle Vie gives me space for that. Um,
Hmm.
and probably also in my life and career, but also in the space, I feel like these days I'm in a space of more experimentation. And
Yes.
LaBelle holds space for that, because,
Yes.
we check in, and a win is a win. Like, you wrote
Right.
a Substack today. Okay, great.
Yes.
You wrote a newsletter. Okay, great. You wrote a chapter, and so I feel like the space has evolved, and I have evolved in tandem with
Yes.
the space.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, there's so much there. I'm like getting emotional thinking about all the layers of the things that you just mentioned. Okay, so let's start with we were both working on our like we so you've done some co-editing work as well, which we can get
Hmm.
into if you want to get
Hmm.
into that. But this was your second single author book. And I remember one of
Hmm.
the things that we were both doing was like looking at our first book, like we did this before,
Like the pep
reminding
talk.
ourselves that we had the
I can
capacity.
do it. I can
I can
do
do it. I can do it. I can do it.
it.
So I do remember that part of us both like working on the second single author book projects and kind of revisiting the first one, even though the second book was different from the first one, but just as a reminder of like you have done this before and you can do it again. I also appreciated like so there still is structure where like we do these morning writing sessions. People can kind of pop in and pop out as they need to. So I'm not like micromanaging who's there or what time they get there. It's just like pop
Mhm.
in when you can. If you only have 30 minutes, that's fine. And then also we would do these other kind of pop-ups where I'm like, okay, it's outside our usual meeting time, but I'm on if anybody wants to hop on like a Saturday or on, whatever the case may be, or in the afternoon or something like that. And then yes, like the modeling taking time off and that you can still advance a project without doing it 7 days a week, 8 hours a
Mhm.
day kind of thing. So like the
Mhm.
Freedom Fridays, I love people who were able to get on board with that. You're always, I think we're the
Always on
most
a
being
freedom.
toward freedom.
Yeah, and freedom
So it's like Freedom
anything.
Fridays,
Sign me
yes.
up.
Less
Yeah.
work in the summer, yes. But then also you being pregnant and having the baby during so of course, like I have 4 kids. Oh, also let me just note that I did clock you said not my second child, but my last child. Hold on, you're frozen. Can you hear me? Okay, we're gonna pause. Let's see if she comes back or if she needs to exit and come back in.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
So you pause for a second, but you're back. Okay, so I was saying I clocked that you said your last child, not just your second child, like for the clarity of like
Yes.
that's the last one. But I know that there was something really powerful about you both being pregnant and showing up writing, and then you having the baby and showing up writing because the baby was with you for like those first 2 years. So it went from like pregnancy to like infant to like
Mhm.
toddler, where we would see your son on the
Yeah.
screen. And
Yeah.
I know that was very encouraging for other mothers in the space to be able to see somebody who was both a writer and a mother, like literally doing it, and then La Belle Vie Writers being a space where you could show up with your baby, right? Like nobody was like, we don't want to see the kid or the kid's not welcome
Yeah.
here. You know what I mean? So I know that was just, I know at least one person in particular who was just like, it was so powerful for me to see you with your son and writing and as she was finishing her first book for Tenure. So I appreciate just the modeling that you did there too.
I appreciate hearing that because it's one of those things that, we could talk about. Mom guilt is like always a chance to question what you do. And when I think back on that time, I'm of two minds of it. On the one hand, I'm like, I'm amazing. Like I was nursing a baby and
Right.
typing one finger. But then there are times where I'm like, that was so crazy. Like, why did I do that? So it's both, but the reminder that it's helpful for people to see that,
Yeah.
and I think for me, it was both doing what I needed to do for a host of reasons that I had access to at the time, right?
Yeah.
The practical, I want this done, I want my promotion, I want these things.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also, I think, in a spiritual sense, something I was doing for myself
Mm-hmm.
rather than mothering
Yeah.
was writing what I cared about writing. And so,
Yeah.
Toni Morrison is one of my guides, and she talks about just that realization she only had to write and take care of those kids. Like
Right.
that
Like these
is
are the only things
really
she has to do
is
that are
all I
really
have
important.
to do.
Yes.
And to make writing that simple is like not I have to write for promotion, not I have to turn in this article. I just
Hmm.
have to write. It might
Yeah.
be journal writing, it might be typing, but
Yeah.
like the spiritual part of writing, like
Yes.
has to happen for me. And so I think in that I find peace about that. And that kid is totally fine, both with being
Absolutely.
on camera and in his life. So
Right.
also a reminder to find one less thing to be guilty about as a mom because
Yes.
we
Yes.
don't care.
I appreciate you naming that nuance because it's like on the one hand, the message is not you have to do all the things or you're
Mhm.
obligated to do all the things or stress yourself out doing all the things.
Mhm.
And there are things that we want to do, like we have multiple desires that are sometimes competing in our lives. And
Yeah.
how do you make space for those things without, putting too much pressure on yourself or feeling a bunch of guilt about it? So I
Yeah.
appreciate you naming the like, yeah, there were some practical elements to me wanting to write, but then there's also these spiritual aspects of it that I want to
Mhm.
stay connected to that
Yeah.
coexist with motherhood that are not, it's not like you're not choosing between motherhood and writing,
Mhm.
right? And the
No.
the Toni Morrison clip that I'm thinking of, that you're referencing, is when she's at like that kind of dinner conversation with Oprah, and she's like, she has all this list of 1,000 things to do, and she's
Yep.
overwhelmed, and she's like, okay, but what do I actually have to do here? And it
Mhm.
boils down to these two things, like writing and mothering.
Yeah, and that have to of writing, I think for me, when I think back over, sometimes the have to is different than what I think it is in the
Hmm.
moment.
Hmm.
Like in that moment, if you had asked me, that have to was again like the work imperatives, the
Hmm.
kind of frustration with writing, like I just gotta be free of this
Hmm.
project. So I
Hmm.
gotta write it to get free of it. Um,
Hmm.
but now in hindsight, it's also like I have to do everything that happens with writing.
Hmm.
Emote, think, express, like all of that has
Hmm.
to happen. And
Yeah.
so the writing is the container for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also love this auntie moment that you had where you're like, let me be an auntie for a moment, because I think it connects to this as well of like the different types of writing that's done or having writing that does not feel like it's only interest of or the service of the
Yeah.
institution. And
Yeah.
so, like, we're talking about our books and things like that. You talk about op-eds, Substacks, and things like
Mhm.
that. But let's get into that a little bit, like having a space that encourage, like La Belle Vie Writers being a space that encourages different type and values different types of writing. It's not just the peer-reviewed journal article or just the
Yeah.
book, although people certainly do that in the space. But like you mentioned, now you're in the space of more experiential writing. So let's just kind of, can we trace this trajectory for you? Like when you look at where you were with your first book project and then the second book project and then where you
Mhm.
are now, how has that shifted for you over time? And I know there's like life shifts have happened as well,
Yeah.
but I know oftentimes like the first book, it's like the tenure book, right? And it's like, it's
Yeah.
passionate and as much as we might love the book, it's still weighed down by like, this is the thing that gets one tenure,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And then the second book is usually like that promotion to full professor book,
Hmm.
right? And so there's
Yeah.
still something, again, as much as we may love the projects, or I love both of my book projects, but
Hmm.
the weight of the promotion was also tethered to that in some ways. And so there are ways
Yeah.
to resist that. But now being in this other space where it's just like, like Steve Biko said, I write what I like kind of thing.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
talk about that for yourself.
Yeah, so Picture Freedom was a project that, I lived with for a long time. I started the archival research for that project before enrolling in my PhD program. And so
Mm,
I had lived with that for like a long time. And it's
hmm
about Philadelphia, it's about free Black women in Philadelphia. And again, the writing and spiritual stuff for me, I feel like I was being kind of dragged along, just like do this, go here, find this. And I did it. And, I wrote that book and it's my first. Firsts are important just by
hmm
way of being first sometimes. And so I feel like one of the things I so appreciate about Picture Freedom is that I do this. I think a lot of writers do this secretly. When I go back and look at it, I'm like, yeah, this still checks out. Like I still
Yes, I
I
definitely do it.
still
Not even
stand by
secretly.
this.
Yeah, I reread. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
I was
yeah, I
doing the
was saying
thing.
some stuff, I was saying
Like I
some
still
stuff.
stand by my
I
words.
still stand by this, especially in this political moment, to look back, I'm like, yeah, these myths about how Black people need to be visible and
Hmm
invisible, and, we need to be worried about whiteness when whiteness is often most worried about Black people, all
Right.
that stuff still holds for me. And so I think I appreciate that. And I appreciate, um, a friend from grad school says this. We have joked about this that I thought I knew how to write until
Mm.
I had to write a book.
hmm
So I appreciate that as a space wherein I realized I had learned to write, like
Yeah.
through the writing of that book. It had all the tenure pressures, and so I cite extensively because that's what you got to do for that kind of writing. And so by the time I got to New Growth, I actually had the research idea for New Growth while writing my dissertation.
hmm
And so I tell people that kind of just as a bit of truth,
hmm
that especially I think the pace the academy moves now, like
Yeah.
you don't have until third year review to
Yeah.
figure out the next project if you're faculty at an R1 institution.
Yeah.
And so I kind of casually had this idea about hair, this interest in hair. I had stopped chemically straightening my hair. So
hmm
I was living with that idea really the whole tenure track time and started
hmm
to write fellowships for it before tenure, got tenure, started working on New Growth full time. And so that book is different from the first, special to me in its own way. I think with New Growth, I was very aware
hmm
of it was only one person, it wasn't many people, but I guess doubt is a motivator for me. This sense that like hair couldn't be an academic subject.
mm
Um, someone's belief that and actually a Black person's belief, which is hilarious to me now, but
Yeah.
bless their heart. It really it kind of drove me both. I knew it could be an academic subject because mine is not the first book, but I did feel kind of compelled to add theoretical rigor to this
Mm-hmm.
idea of Black hair that like
Mm-hmm.
I think latent in that assumption is that we know Black hair, right?
Yeah.
And that's something people think about everything about Black life. We know all there is to know about,
Right.
Black people, and Black people don't know all there is to know about Black,
Right.
So um, I think new growth for me more than picture freedom. I was down for a fight, you know.
Yes. Well, and
And
do you think being tenured supports that because you feel
I
like you have a little
do.
bit more of a
I do think, I could afford the fight, right?
mm-hmm.
And I think the subject, because I felt like the amount of time I've spent with this subject, somebody might think they know it differently, but that
Yeah.
does, I don't know what I know,
Right.
like, for Black people. And I used to say Black women, but it turns out Black men have some of this too. Like Black people in their hair, that's a lifelong complicated
Yeah.
relationship, And so I think for me, new growth was I didn't enter that thinking I need to learn about hair. It was more the application of academic tools to something
Yeah.
that I knew so personally and
Yeah.
to make something so personal unfamiliar enough for me to write critically about
Mm-hmm.
and so I feel like I was able to do that and I was very proud of that. I am very proud of it. um, but then on the other side of promotion there's this different thing now where people I want to talk to about hair or who
Mm-hmm.
want to talk to me about hair,
Mm-hmm.
I think need a little bit of breathing room. New
Mm.
growth is dense and intense in some ways. And so I'm actually starting a project of just kind of, I guess, translating that gift
Yeah.
into something applicable to people outside the academy
Yeah.
because I think it's a scholarly book. And
Yeah.
for me, it needed to be, but I don't wish to only talk to scholars
Yeah.
anymore. And so that's where I'm at with that book and in my new writing now. So
Yes.
I'm writing this book about Harriet Tubman's representation, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
very clear that that's for a general public
Yeah.
because she is so important to so many people, not
Yeah.
just scholars. Um, and the solo travel creative nonfiction writing is also for a public because I'm thinking about women like me and you, women I'm in conversation with
Yeah.
now, solo moms, single
Yeah.
women in this phase of life. And I think the through line through all of that is always freedom. That's always
Yes.
my jam. That's the thing like I want to know about, be about, think about, care about. Um, and I think the writing has evolved as my relationship to the idea of freedom has changed.
Yes.
That I'm
Well,
not
and your lived experience of it has shifted as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, that's definitely informed all of it. I mean, I think when I first started thinking about Tubman, I was thinking about, always thinking about her images because that's
Mm-hmm.
what I write about. But I was thinking about her in this kind of legacy of images, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sojourner Truth and
Mm-hmm.
Harriet Jacobs. And when
Mm-hmm.
you think of those images, they're respectable portraits. They're
Yes.
seated, dressed for taking a picture, like the people I talk about, and picture freedom. I think as I've embraced my own singleness and
Mm-hmm.
solo parenting identity,
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more interested in Tubman the Rogue, the way that she,
Yes.
does not fit into these boxes about respectability and how
Mm-hmm.
women should be. And so, yeah, it's definitely informing the writing.
I'm excited about this. I mean, I love you naming like the motivation for the academic and scholarly rigor of new growth, and also your desire to approach those topics in a way that is more accessible to the general public. I mean,
Mhm.
of course, like scholarly and general public don't have to be mutually exclusive, but I think it's important to be self-aware of like, okay, I know this is densely written and I know I can write it in a way that's more accessible without it being less rigorous per se.
Right.
And
Yeah.
even as you're approaching the Harriet Tubman project, I think knowing the different audiences that you're writing for and being intentional about how to reach those audiences is also important. And again, not feeling tethered to like the institutional structures and the institutional norms.
Yeah.
I also love that your projects, and I think this is, maybe another auntie moment, but maybe that's what we need to call these when we feel like we're dropping some gems for the up and coming scholars.
Mhm.
But both this idea of, I think there's a certain kind of willingness to fight, but knowing what you're fighting for, right? Because some people
Mhm.
just like to fight to be fighting, and we're
Mhm.
not recommending
Mhm.
that. But like
Mhm.
knowing where what your line is, what your boundary is
Yeah.
with certain things, with certain projects, I think is important throughout the process. Because I think sometimes people think like, oh, well, when I get tenure, then suddenly I'm going to get a backbone. And it's like, okay, if you haven't been practicing, maintaining your boundaries
It's
from
true.
grad school, pre-tenure, post, it's not going to suddenly appear post-tenure. But I think
Mhm.
there are certain kind of risks that you can take more readily post-tenure than
Mhm.
pre-tenure. But I don't think wait until you get tenure for anything, which is not what you were saying. But I just want to say that explicitly. But also what you were saying in terms of, oh, what I was going to get to was like the importance of having a sense of like alignment with your work and your projects and knowing that that will always make room for wherever you need to go. I think some people try to like quote unquote game the system where it's like, well, this is going to be popular or that's going to be popular. And
Mhm.
they try to write to whatever they think the quote unquote market is as opposed to what they're passionate about. And I
Yeah.
think part of the success of projects comes from like it's aligned with you, you're passionate about it, it's meaningful to you as opposed to like this is some popular thing, some popular bandwagon that people are jumping on. And so I know with like Picture Freedom with Obama in the White House, and we could talk about the reception of the book. Like one of the things I remember you talking about everybody wanted to talk about was like this wallpaper in the White House with
Mhm.
Picture Freedom, right?
Mhm.
Or with New Growth, a lot of people wanted to talk about like your personal hair journey, even though you were doing like
Yes.
this scholarly
Mhm.
project. But also on this hill in the New Growth, we got these documentaries and there were these different festivals. So like they were all, so it's like you weren't writing to the festivals, but it just was so aligned that when your book came out, these things were
Yeah.
going on and your book was in conversation with things that were going on. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that in terms of like,
Yeah. Yeah.
your passion projects and then how that can align with like, things will line up for what you're doing.
Yeah, I have felt fortunate in that regard, even if the popular moment, focused on something that I didn't think was what it was all about, right? Like
Hmm.
Picture Freedom is about, I think Picture Freedom tells a story about why we get an Obama,
Hmm.
not just that there's the wallpaper,
Right.
but it's like a happy accident,
Yeah.
that these things happen. I think the same with the hair festivals and the Crown Act and all of these kind of things. I think I've been fortunate for that to happen. And I think part of how it happened is just um, kind of allowing myself to be guided by the projects.
Yeah.
Because I do think things come up when you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yes.
It's like help shows up. I see this a lot with the Tubman project that
Hmm.
I'll follow a lead, I'll send a note and get back all of this stuff that I
Yeah.
was asking. Photographs that people have in their attic, photographs that they took on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, just
Hmm.
help. And
Yeah.
so I think we talk about this in other areas, but there's a certain ease that comes with just doing what
Yes.
you're supposed to be doing. And
Yes.
when I have done that, more comes.
Yes. Yes
Um,
to ease and
mhm.
naming ease. And
Yeah.
again, the alignment. And I want to go back to because you were even talking about this when you were talking about the first book project where you're like, okay, the kind of and this is a spiritual practice, right? And so you
Mhm.
have this kind of spiritual support, this otherworldly support that comes in
Yeah.
to help guide the project. So like you're already researching picture and freedom before you even start your PhD program. And then
Mhm.
while you're dissertating, you're already thinking about the new growth project. And it's not just this strategic, I need to do this to get that. It's like this is the thing that's coming to you and you're honoring that and then you're putting your attention to it. And then the ease of which in saying embracing the ease doesn't mean it's easy to write a book per se, but I think some people do want to be in the doom and gloom and suffering of any given
Yes.
project as opposed to like
Yes.
the ease of like, yeah, this is, you have to show up to do the thing that you're doing, but it can be easeful. It doesn't have to be this
Yeah, it
doom,
doesn't have to
gloom,
be doom
suffering.
and gloom. It doesn't have to be torturous. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be arduous. There's a hard work element in writing a book of just
Hmm.
showing up to do the writing, but
Yeah.
the research project process, the sense of being called to deal with this subject,
Hmm.
I have experienced ease in that. And I
Yeah.
even now with the Tubman project and the, solo stuff. It's things just come to me,
Yeah.
and now I'm fortunate. These are books 3 and 4. I know the process,
Mm-hmm.
even if I don't know what the finished book will be, I know the process. And so now even more, I trust what comes to me.
Mm-hmm.
Random person want to email me about some Tubman mural they photographed. I just say thank you. I don't
Yeah.
have, who is this? What is this? Why is this? It's just more affirmation that I should
Yeah.
keep going with the project.
Yes, the encouragement along the way that you are on
Mhm.
the right path, that
And
confirmation.
relatedly, when there's not that, is food for thought. Like maybe I
Yeah.
shouldn't be doing this
Not
because,
forcing it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Mhm.
love that. What have been some of your favorite book events in terms of like when you're presenting the books that are out to the world or even the ones that are in
Mhm.
process? What have
Yeah.
you most enjoyed in terms of some of the events that you've done?
Sure. I did a book event in Delray, Florida,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds so random to me. But it was lovely. It was community. It was
Mm-hmm.
people from all walks of life. And we were talking about hair. And in the audience, there was every kind of hair imaginable,
Mm-hmm.
folks with alopecia, folks with locks, folks with straight hair. And so that was a really warm thing for me,
Mm-hmm.
community engagement, being in the world with the work and being in the world in a way where, yes, I am an expert, but I'm with folks, not
Mm-hmm.
so, far removed from them,
Mm-hmm.
so that was nice. Recently, is it recent? I guess earlier this year, late last year, um, I was able to participate in an event at the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New
Mm-hmm.
York on design, where an artist reimagined the wallpaper I
Mm-hmm.
talk about in Picture Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was special to think that I had written something that held relevance over
Yes.
time, so that was a lot of fun. I think more and more I enjoy things that are out in the world,
Yeah.
off campus.
Not in some
The
ivory tower
people,
somewhere.
yeah, before the pandemic at Duke, I was able to do a lot of programming that was free and open to the public, and
Mm-hmm.
people in Durham and Raleigh came to things, and that
Mm-hmm.
was really special. And that was my favorite stuff. The
Mm-hmm.
pandemic really changed how we do things, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's not quite that way anymore. But I have held an appreciation for that way of communing with folks. But before New Growth, the artist Allison Sarr blessed me with a in-person conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We did that in Durham, but off campus, and it was only a few Duke people, my closest colleagues, but
Mm-hmm.
there was snapping and yes, and just
Yes.
all the things, all the magic that we bring to gathering. And so that
Yes.
that is my favorite stuff these days.
That's beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that again, also for people who feel like it can only or should only be the
Mhm.
very kind of uptight
Yeah,
academic space. And
it
it's just
doesn't
like
have to be.
it doesn't have to be. You can be engaged with community in ways
Yep.
that are very beautiful and to remind you that, that there is this beautiful kind of connection.
And I would dare to say you probably need to be, even if you think you want to keep going in the academy, because that alone won't
It
feed
will
you,
not sustain you.
especially if you call yourself writing about Black people, just
That
to be
part.
honest. So,
That part.
yeah.
Whew. Yeah. Okay, well, we've talked a little bit about your research project, so we can get into that a little bit more. But I'm also curious. Well, actually, I do want to put a pin in. You've talked about this travel memoir writing that you're doing, and I know you've already done at least one Substack where you're talking
Hmm.
about some of your own travel memoir and making connections with Tracy Ellis Ross. So
Hmm.
if you want to say anything about that, you're welcome to.
Yes, this is my fixation really about, women 40 and up living their freedom or figuring out how to and whatever that means for them. What I love about the Tracy Ellis Ross part, and this is in the Substack, is that there's something, she talks a lot about not having children and how she has felt about that. And, almost trying to explain what makes her experience unique in that regard. But I
Hmm.
think she's a model even for women with children
Hmm.
about the importance of figuring out who you are. And I think that's there's in some sense an urgency for women with children to figure
Yes.
that out even more so because it's
Yes.
easy to hide behind children and
Yeah.
motherhood is an identity and a life that it ain't. And so
Right.
and so I feel very much in conversation with her, Black women in their 50s who I admire and up, and just women in particular on a path of figuring out who they are and then actually being who they are.
Yes. The both
And
and the
they're
figuring it
both
out and
in
being
because
like
it's not
stepping into
enough
it.
to know and then still stay hiding in a life that doesn't actually match who you are.
Hmm.
So, for me, my entire journey has been as a solo parent,
Hmm.
but there was something different about living out loud about that.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so the writing is really experimental, um, creative nonfiction, a little bit of self-help,
Yeah.
a question I get often secretly from attached women is how did you do it?
Yes.
Have you lived this free this way? And so the writing is kind of me working through the answer to that,
Yes.
what are the things I've done and not done to,
Yes.
you know, find myself and hold on to myself and be myself in all the spaces of my life.
Yes, I love this because this is also a great segue into like, okay, so what's shifted in your life it's been what,
Yes,
2 years since New Growth came out.
yes,
Of course, y'all know I'm team happily unmarried, delightfully divorced, and erotically empowered. And that
yes.
happily unmarried can both be divorcing from marriage as well as never
Hmm.
being married, but like not being weighed down
Attached.
by a
Yeah.
relationship that is not aligned.
Yes.
So I love that you are talking about this, and I love you also naming the secret part of it because a lot of stuff, like
Hmm.
I live in Savannah where it's very traditional. I've like more traditional than I expected. It's very different from say like in Atlanta, even though that can be
Yeah.
traditional in its own ways.
Hmm.
But people like Black women in particular tend to lead with, my husband and I'm married and I go to
Hmm.
church and these kinds of things. And I tend to introduce myself as Dr. Catherine Sophia Bell, supporting Black women who want to be happily unmarried, delightfully divorced, and erotically empowered. And initially, there's a little bit of pearl clutching about that, but inevitably, on the side conversations, people are talking about either how much their husband gets on their nerves, or how they are happy to have gotten out of their marriage, or how they've been married and are engaged but don't actually want to get married again. So it's like once you open up the space for people to talk more freely about
I do
alternatives to the
so.
expectation of marriage and motherhood and other kinds of things, then it's like you're both speaking your truth and your power and being aligned with, again, discovering who you are and how to be that person. But I think it does also give other people models and encouragement um, and just ways of doing that, like seeing it real time of what that can look like. And it's not, I mean, it's similar to the doom and gloom we were talking about with writing. I think there's this doom and gloom associated with writing and getting tenure and getting promotion. And there's this doom and gloom associated with uncoupling from other people,
Hmm.
ending relationships that are no longer
Conscious
aligned. I'm like
uncouple.
severing
Yeah.
ties, cutting people off,
Yeah.
however you want to
Cutting
phrase that.
cords.
But there's this
Yeah.
assumption that like life after that is, you're dried up or you can't date anymore, or
Uh-huh.
there's no more
Yeah.
romance, or again, that
Yeah.
scarcity mentality of there are not
Hmm.
any good men in the world and all of this other kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And I think it's important to note, not that we're decentering men, period. But alongside that, there are very generous people who love nothing more than to center your pleasure. And if you haven't
Yes.
experienced that up to this point, I think it's important for people who are experiencing that to share that so that women know you can get out of a relationship where you're emotionally, sexually, financially starved and
Yep.
enter into other options where you can be very generously fed.
Generously. And the writing is really about how much abundance is on the other side of this
Yes.
kind of embracing who you are and refusing things that don't align with that, right?
Hmm.
So for me, since New Growth came out, I've been yeah, I guess it's a promotion to the named professorship at
Yes.
Duke. So there's that. I'm co-parents with my kid's dad. And I think for folks imagining that from within a relationship,
Hmm.
especially when they don't want to be in, all of such a shift would seem to mean that there's going to be less in life, less pleasure, less time
Hmm.
for anything, less money, less joy. And it's really the opposite,
Yes.
and it's really the sense of more is really because it's just living in alignment with who I actually am and
Yes.
prioritizing myself. I think that's another myth of motherhood, that being a good mother means you sacrifice everything every
Right.
day for your kids. But I think if you're dealing with your kids day to day, the sacrifice is baked in. You don't have to,
Right. There's no way to not sacrifice.
yeah,
Yeah.
you don't have to go out of your way to find sacrifice. I
Hmm.
sacrifice eating pizza every Friday when I don't want pizza anymore. So the sacrifice is going to happen. But I think the really figuring out who I am and then being her,
Yeah.
is abundant because I'm not leading with sacrifice. I'm leading
Right.
with what aligns with what I want for myself moment by moment, really,
Yeah.
not even just, next month, next summer, next year, but there's always a chance to be in alignment. And I
Yes.
think that's really the call on everyone's life.
Yes.
Mothers are, as we've talked about, trapped into believing that they need to do something else,
Right.
which is what I love when you tell me about these introductions around Savannah. I hear it here in Durham as well, Black
Hmm.
women leading with, I'm married, this is my husband, I go to church, I do. What I believe they are telling me is, and what they're telling you is, I'm a good girl, right?
Mm.
Like I'm a
Hmm.
good person, and
Yeah.
it's how you know it. And so when you or I is like, well, I'm not, because
That man and F them kids.
yeah, I think people, part of what they're trying to figure out is, well, how can you have a good life and not be a good girl? How can
It's
you?
interesting because it's actually the opposite. I think the more you
Yes,
try to conform to the model, like the good girl is a construction of the patriarchy, right? To
yes,
get you to
yep,
be obedient, subservient,
yep,
sacrificing, martyr,
yep,
all of that kind
hmm,
of stuff. And
fierce,
like anytime you reject that in any way, shape, or form, you fall outside of the good girl. But that's
yeah,
actually where the freedom is. That's where the
yeah,
juiciness is. That's where the
yeah,
alignment is, right?
yeah,
Because the same people who will lead with I'm married, will then also feel compelled to explain why theirs is a good marriage. And the more they talk, the more I realize how trapped they are, right? Because it's
yes,
like, well, my husband lets me, is the
yes,
language that get used. Or I'm fortunate because my husband takes out the
hmm,
trash. Or I'm fortunate
yeah,
because my husband lets me work
hmm,
whatever job or travel, right? And
hmm,
so, and all I hear is like, trap, 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 trap,
trap,
right?
trap,
When
trap, trap,
it's just
trap.
like,
Trapped in the trap house, trap, 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 trap.
listen. And
Yeah,
so,
and it makes the good what is good, I think, is not actually good. It's sacrifice.
mhm.
And sacrifice is a short path to manipulation, right? I
Hmm.
don't get what I want unless I give up. And so,
Right,
I to get what I want, I have to seem like I don't want anything, right?
right.
Manipulation. And then to ensure I get something as opposed to nothing, I have to control. Is this
Hmm.
a really dark spiral that I don't think we talk about enough?
Listen,
And that when you prioritize yourself, you can actually be good to people because
you
you're not
can.
guilty, you
And you
know?
feel more like you can do it from this generous, again, from this space of abundance, from this space of
Yeah,
overflow. I think part of the issue is also like the resentment that comes when you're constantly putting your needs aside, not acknowledging that you have needs, not vocalizing your needs and not
yep,
having your needs met, but always being expected to anticipate everybody else's needs, whether
yep,
it's the partner or the children or the partner
yep,
as additional child who's
yep,
grown. And like
yep.
that wears on
It
us
does.
over time. And so part of the kind of glow up that happens post
Hmm.
divorce or post a breakup is you're
Yeah,
not weighed down by taking care of a
yeah,
fully grown
yeah,
human who wasn't
yes,
like contributing their part in the
yes.
to the whole.
Yeah, and doing nothing for yourself and hoping you get to live off of someone else thinking to do for you when you could just do for
When
yourself
you could just
first.
do it for yourself, or you've had however many years to see them not think to do it for
Yeah,
you.
and accept that, right? And not try to control them into who you want them to be, which I think is another interesting part of all of that mess is that it's actually not loving to insist someone be other than who they are.
Who they actually are. And that's both for you and for the people in your
Yeah,
life, right? Like, so
yeah.
you not being who you are, acknowledging again
Hmm.
who you are and
Hmm.
being that person and
Yeah.
acknowledging those needs and having those needs met is
Hmm.
not loving to yourself. But then being in partnership with people who have shown you that they have no desire to,
To do
be
what you
aligned in
want.
this way
Yeah.
is not loving toward them, right? So, like, let everybody be free.
Yeah, so
Um,
there's no love in the release. It's self-love
there is
first,
love in
but
the
it is,
release.
even though it's not talked about in that way, it is loving to say, go be who you are, and I'll go
Mm-hmm.
be who I am, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
figure out whatever we gotta figure
Figure
out.
out the logistics with the people that have been brought in the
Mhm.
world and
Exactly, exactly, because they'll be all right.
they
Mhm.
will be. They really will. And I think and one of the other things that we've talked about is this goes back to the alignment, but bringing another kind of layer to the alignment is we've talked about like the more you say yes to things you don't want, the more you get what you don't want.
Yep.
But the more you say no to things you don't want, you no longer are bringing in and attracting a thing you don't
Yeah.
want. So it's like it's important to say yes to what you want so that you can get more of
Yes.
what you want, and to say
Yep.
no to what you don't want so that you are not inviting more of what you don't
Mhm.
want. And so like sometimes I talk about it as the sacred yes and sacred no. But when we're constantly feeling this sense of obligation to say yes to a thing that we actually don't want to do, don't want to be, all of that kind of
Mhm.
stuff, you are inviting more of that thing that you actually don't
And then
want.
mad, like, why do I keep
And then
getting,
resentful. Yeah. And it's like, well, you keep saying
because
yes
you
to the
keep
thing.
welcoming it in and
You keep saying
offering
yes
it
to the
a
thing.
seat and a blanket, and
Yeah, like being
the
a
thing that
hospitable, the
yeah,
hostess with the mostest to the thing that you don't
yeah,
actually
to
want
the
in your
thing you
life.
don't want.
Hmm.
Yeah, thinking you have to earn your good. And I think that
Yes.
is, part of the announcing how good you are through your attachments as a wife and a church wife.
Yes.
But it's like
And the
you don't have to
sacrifices
earn
again, or
good.
the exhaustion.
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to
Mm-mm-mm.
earn good, especially as a Black woman. You don't have to
Mm-mm.
earn
Not
good.
at all. Just be with it
Yeah.
and give yourself
Mhm.
permission to have what's already there for
Yeah.
sure.
And that's at home and at work.
In every area. But we've talked about this a lot before because we clearly talk a lot.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
there's so many parallels and overlaps, right? Like to
Yes.
how we show up at home and how we show up at work and the kind of oppressive systems at work at home and the oppressive systems
Yeah.
at work.
There's a
And
lot of
so
overlap.
there's so much overlap. So freeing yourself in one doesn't automatically free yourself in the other, but you can be intentional about getting
Hmm.
free in tandem from
Hmm.
like
You
those
sure can.
personal situations as well as the professional
You
situations.
sure can.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about is there anything else that you want to share? I know I definitely want to come back to which I mentioned in the introduction that you are offering this fabulous 10-day book proposal self-paced course. So I want to
Yeah.
invite you to share that. And I will just say before you do this that with that first book that you did, this is the book proposal that I call the book proposal heard around the world. I know so many Black women in so many different disciplines that were like using your book proposal as like the model book
I
proposal. And
know.
so I love that you have like put together a formal class to support people in writing their book proposals. But I just want people to know who may not know that you are like the book proposal expert and people were
Thank
relying
you.
on yours as a model for a long time. So talk to us about that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so my book proposal for Picture Freedom, I have seen it in many hands that I did not give it to, but I'm glad it is useful to people. And so from people asking me formally and informally for help, I have made it into a course that's self-paced,
Hmm.
where you can, in 10 days get your book proposal sorted out. It is both the sort of structure of a proposal, but
Hmm.
also the thinking behind it. I
Hmm.
think when I finally figured out how to crack the code, it was figuring out what does the document need to do,
Hmm.
not just kind of checking the box of writing one so I could then get a contract. And so
Hmm.
it's something I understand, both from writing for contracts and being on press boards and seeing,
Hmm.
what that looks like behind the scenes. And so I do like helping new authors figure
Hmm.
it out, because I think for especially new professors on the tenure track, it's a source of great stress.
Yeah,
And your colleagues expect you to figure it out, but they, especially as tenure standards have changed, they may or may not have had to figure it out for themselves,
themselves. Hmm.
So I think in an environment where really these days success as a tenure track person requires you find support off site, not just
Hmm.
on campus, that
Hmm.
the class is meant to be that kind of support.
I
Um,
love that.
Thank you for sharing it with your audience.
Yes, I mean, because you are clearly an expert at this thing, so I'm glad that you and I love you sharing like, okay, people are constantly coming to you, and I think this is I'm going to just put a plug here into for thinking about our skill sets that are not that don't have to be tied only to like the institution
Yes.
where we are, right? Because people are constantly asking you questions. So people who are listening and watching, like, what's the thing that people constantly come to you and ask you about, and how
Yes.
can you do
Hmm.
something with that to create an offer for other people. So I
Yeah.
love that you're also doing this in an easeful way where you're not having to individually tell everybody the same thing, but you're like, I'm bringing together this knowledge and expertise in an accessible way where you can pace yourself across 10 days or in 10 sections how to get their book
Yeah.
proposal together. So I love that.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah,
And
I'm excited, and folks can find it through the links.
yes, I will definitely link to it when I post the video. Okay, is there anything else that you wanted to share?
I think we really touched on everything, the evolution of the space, the evolution of the writing, the evolution of me. I guess I would just end by saying I'm excited, I'm excited about the writing. I'm excited about where I am in life. I'm excited about these conversations that you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm excited about the conversations you and I have. I do see a particular opportunity for more in-person
Yes.
conversations
Yes.
around the things that we've talked about, and just, the encouragement you offer people to create space and find space outside of institutional spaces that don't
Yeah.
always feel healthy and fulfilling. So
Yeah.
that's it. And just
For
thank
sure.
you for this invitation.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. And I will just say one more thing about the what's important and powerful about this book proposal that course that you're offering is, and you hinted at this, but I want to say this again because we see this also with folks in Belle Vie Writers and other people that I'm coaching. Not everybody, I think we got a particular kind of like mentoring and professional
Mhm.
development that is not so much there anymore. And so you even mentioning like, okay, some people are expecting you to write this document that they never actually had to write because they got tenure without actually having to write a book or without having to do a book proposal. And so there's a way of filling in the gaps of some of that mentoring. That's part of what Belle Vie Writers does. That's part of what like
Yeah.
Professor Playbook and other things do. But I
Mhm.
love that that you because I don't specialize in book proposals. I share like I wrote this cover letter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I love that this is an area of expertise for you. You do it very well and very effectively. So I'm
Thank
excited about
you.
people being able to opt into this with you.
Thank you. Yeah, you saying that as a reminder to me. I think something that, unexpected benefit of offering it to people in this way, is that when you do things like this on campus, or, if a junior person writes a proposal and asks their campus colleague to read it, there's a sense of surveillance, right? That
Yes,
everything you write like has to be great the first time out.
yes,
It won't be forgiven. And so I appreciate the kind of holding space outside of that. If your
yes,
first draft sucks, it doesn't matter to me, And so I think it's important, yeah, to find those spaces, and
yes.
you can
I
have
love this so much because you're so consistent because this is like basically coming back to like the whole kind of marinage. Like
yes,
you need safe spaces
you
outside of
need
your
safe
institution.
spaces.
Whether like
Yeah.
so like La Belle Vie Writers is this writing
Hmm.
space that's not just whatever writing groups
Yeah.
might be offered on campus where you can like show up and be yourself
Hmm.
without that surveillance and you're like, yes, in this book proposal
Hmm.
workshop and chorus is a space where you can like share your drafts and not feel like it has to be, super polished or
Yeah.
perfected in
Yeah,
a
that
way
you're
that
gonna be
you might feel it
punished.
compelled to be if
Hmm.
like one of your faculty mentors is looking at it or something
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah.
yes to
Yeah.
naming, surveillance, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
getting free, like our pockets of
Getting free
freedom.
of it. Yes.
So the moral
Yes.
of the story is alignment, freedom,
Free
joy,
your ass
pleasure, and
and your
ease.
mind. Yeah. Free your mind and your ass will follow. Yeah. Yeah.
That part. Thank you so
All
much, Jasmine.
right.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.